Department says that you're prioritizing munitions, yet you cut 58% of Joint Munitions Command at Rock Island. Also,
munitions are not built by commands.
Do you think it's acceptable to fire veterans?
Sometimes things happen.
You testified that if you work hard, you do the work, you keep your job. But that's not what's happening. And you allege it is being done to maximize efficiency? Explain that.
I fundamentally believe the Department of War should not be subject to collective bargaining, full stop.
Wait, this isn't political theater. This is a Secretary of Defense managing the largest military budget in human history, getting caught on camera, unable to explain why he is simultaneously telling America that munitions are his top priority while firing 58% of the people who actually make them.
I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To General Kane, on behalf of myself and my constituents, we thank you for your service and your leadership to our military men and women, to our service members and the veterans that I see in our committee today. Thank you for your support of our great country. Mr. Hegseth, I hear from your officials in our briefings here on the Hill, and because I live in an Army town, I now hear from neighbors at the grocery store who are worried about our munition stockpiles that are now down to critical levels, and they sure don't want another forever war. So, Mr. Secretary, first of all, talk to us about the need to renew munition stockpiles, and tell us what happens when munition stockpiles become depleted.
Well, first of all, I would note that, as you know, we give weekly briefings on munitions to this committee, so it's not something that's withheld from any of the members here.
We appreciate that.
But it's also a topic that isn't something that should be publicly discussed as far as any shortfalls that may exist. But I would assure you that there are not shortfalls that exist in our ability to execute the missions around the world. And the reason we're investing in the defense industrial base with $1.5 trillion is to make sure the greatest companies in the world, which have been falling behind for decades, are running faster than ever before to give us 2x, 3x, 4x of the critical munitions, your Patriots, your THAADs, your SM-3s, every other standard missile
And my neighbors work really hard to make sure that we can.
It's jobs in America. It's what our warfighters need.
So could you tell me why we're firing the people at Joint Munitions Command for no cause other than just telling them they're overhired or they're surplus employee? Joint Munitions Command?
I would have to look into the particular circumstances of that, but there have been places where we haven't been moving fast enough with munitions, and when people don't move fast enough in the Department of War, we find someone else that will run fast.
This is Joint Munitions Command. I mean, your department says that you're prioritizing munitions, yet you cut 58% of Joint Munitions Command at Rock Island. But let me move on. My district is also
munitions are not built by commands. Munitions are built by businesses.
They're the ones that are.
And we are very good at building commands and bureaucracies and slapping 3- and 4-star generals in charge of things that don't move things any faster. So our job is to unleash the private sector to provide these things.
How are we going to get it done if we don't have Joint Munitions Command? But let me move on. We also have Army Sustainment Command in my district. Could you tell me why we're firing folks at Army Sustainment Command when now is the time that we should be giving our soldiers every piece of sustainment that we can give them?
Because, as I've stated, the status quo at this department before the Trump administration was unacceptable, and changes had to be made.
Do you think it's acceptable to fire veterans from jobs where they've been, I talk to my neighbors at the Arsenal, and they've worked there 20, 30 years on top of their service to this country, and they're doing it exemplary.
Great performers will always have a job at the Department of War, and when you reestablish merit, sometimes things happen, but we're grateful for all the vets that serve. And in fact, we've created a Patriot pipeline for service members to get into the defense industrial base manufacturing business, to consider that as a second career. So we're leaning into vets and service members as the workforce of the future in our department.
And this isn't me. I mean, they tell me that, they feel you're taking a wrecking ball to the civilian workforce. But, I want to go and follow up on Congressman Norcross's questions about why you terminated collective bargaining earlier this month. This affects hundreds of thousands of hardworking DOD employees. So many of them are veterans who have honorably served our country. You testified that if you work hard, you do the work, you keep your job. But that's not what's happening. And you allege it is being done to maximize efficiency? Explain that.
I thank you for asking that question. I'd love to clarify. I fundamentally believe the Department of War should not be subject to collective bargaining, full stop.
So people shouldn't be able to fight for good wages and being treated well?
I think our department does a great job evaluating and providing pay and benefits for folks across the spectrum.
I would love to invite you to the Rock Island Arsenal so you can look these patriots in the eyes and tell them that. How does creating chaos for long-term civilian workers actually maximize efficiency? Do you have any comment on that?
There are plenty of examples of shipyards and other manufacturing plants where there are restraints that limit the hours, limit the ability of leaders to ensure we're meeting the goals we're supposed to, and I don't think we should live to those constrictions.
Okay. Well, you know what? I want to use the rest of my time to the men and women of our armed forces. Please go forth with the integrity and the morality that you've carried before this administration took us down a path that has allies turning away and American citizens objecting. Do what's right, even if you're asked to do otherwise. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Watch, let that land for a second. 58% gone. Joint Munitions Command, Rock Island Arsenal, the people who track components, predict purchasing timelines, catch defective parts before they get loaded onto aircraft carrying your kids into combat. Not reassigned, not restructured, fired. And when Congressman Sorensen, who represents an actual Army town whose actual neighbors build these actual weapons, asks Pete to explain that contradiction, Pete Hegseth, Rhodes Scholar he is not, looks directly into the camera and says, "Munitions are not built by commands." Sir, the organization is called Joint Munitions Command.
R and C, Sarah, and exhale sharply. It has the word in the title. It is literally named after the thing you just said it doesn't do. This is like the Secretary of Transportation saying roads are not built by the Department of Transportation. This is a man explaining that water is not wet with complete confidence in front of Congress, on the record forever. And the audience watching this live, the neighbors Sorensen mentioned at the grocery store, the veterans who spent 20, 30 years at that arsenal on top of their military service, who were told they're surplus employees. They're not surplus. They are institutional memory. They are the people who know which defense contractor overbilled last fiscal year. They are the firewall between a $1.5 trillion budget and the contractors who would eat every dollar of it without a single accountable audit. Fire them. And you know what fills that vacuum? Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing, with no watchdog, no institutional memory. No one to say, wait, we've seen this failure mode before. Here's the data. But Pete doesn't want a watchdog. Pete wants a blank check and a compliant workforce that cannot collectively bargain, cannot organize, cannot push back, because the moment workers have rights, Pete has accountability. And Pete hates accountability more than he hates reading. Watch his answer on collective bargaining. A man responsible for hundreds of thousands of DoD civilian employees, veterans, engineers, logistics specialists, stay. Should workers be able to fight for good wages and fair treatment? Pete Hegseth's answer, I fundamentally believe the Department of War should not be subject to collective bargaining. Full stop. Full stop. That's it. No data, no analysis, no acknowledgement that without competitive wages and basic worker protections, the federal government cannot recruit or retain the specialized talent that keeps this military functional. Just vibes. Authoritarian vibes with a Fox News delivery and a prayer that nobody follows up. Sorensen follows up. How does creating chaos for long-term civilian workers actually maximize efficiency? And Pete, the man who just demanded merit-based employment for everyone else, cannot answer. He pivots. He deflects. He mentions shipyards. He does everything except address the catastrophic workforce destabilization he is engineering in real time inside the world's most complex defense apparatus, while America is actively at war. China's military analysts are not reading tea leaves right now. They are watching these hearings on YouTube. They are watching the United States Secretary of Defense unable to name the function of Joint Munitions Command. They are watching institutional expertise get fired and replaced with loyalty. They are watching collective bargaining stripped from the very workforce that keeps this military operational, and they are taking notes. Here is the moment that will stay with you. When Sorensen runs out of time, when Pete has successfully dodged every question about Rock Island, Army Sustainment Command, collective bargaining, merit, efficiency, Sorensen stops talking to Hegseth entirely. He turns to the service members in that room, the ones in uniform, the ones who didn't choose this secretary and cannot say so publicly, and he says, please go forth with the integrity and the morality that you carried before this administration took us down a path. He's not talking to Pete anymore. Pete is already lost. He's talking to everyone watching who still believes the institution means something, who knows the difference between a Secretary of Defense and a television personality cosplaying as one. Pete Hegseth had no answer for that because you cannot blah, blah, blah your way out of a conscience. Drop a comment in Shakta's Jirao, Shakta's say, nah, because when the man running the Department of Defense cannot name what Joint Munitions Command does, someone needs to be paying attention. Subscribe because these receipts don't expire.